Welcome to Freedom Fighters Code Gray. I'm your guest host, Mandy Webster. And before we start the show, I just want to let the viewers know that the content discussed today could be triggering as we discuss trauma and exploitation as it relates to human trafficking. If you or someone you know needs help with human trafficking, please feel free to call their hotline that's open 24/7 at 1-833-900-1010. I want to open this episode by saying that I feel privileged and honored to be interviewing your host for the last how many years, Mikhaela? How many years has it been?
Well, the first episode aired, I guess, in 2020. So 5 years now that we have been running the show.
And how many episodes have you done? We were talking about it just before the show.
Yeah, so we will have filmed 60 episodes when everything wraps up.
That's absolutely crazy. Does it feel like 60 or does it feel like 5?
That's a great question. I feel like the time has gone by really quickly, but when I think back to all of the different discussions and content we've had over the years, I can see, oh yeah, the fact that there have been 60 different conversations about this makes sense to me, but at the same time, I feel like there could still be a billion more.
Well, I was going to say, there's probably so much more information to share, but this episode is the final episode of the series, and thank you for allowing me to interview you to wrap it up. I'm usually on the other side, but this feels fun today to talk to you about your episodes, your favorite episodes, the hardest episodes, and just some of your great memories.
Well, and I'm really grateful that you are here having this discussion with me, because you are kind of the reason behind how the show even came to be and how we got to air for all of these years and bring forward all of these voices sharing different stories, important information to help, shed light on really what this issue is like in our community and around the world. So thank you for all the time you took at the very beginning to suggest starting this show and all your work producing over the years alongside Deanne and others who have been just such wonderful behind the scenes supports.
And that's kind of where I want to start is how did this show come to fruition? The idea, the concept, how did it come to fruition?
So to answer that question, I think I'm going to go back a little bit, so just stay with me because it will all connect. But how I got involved in anti-trafficking, I think is important. Anti-trafficking work is important to answer that question because there was a kind of a snowball effect of things that happened after I initially realized that being involved in work, in education, and supporting folks who had been trafficked was something of importance. And so, wow, over a decade now, I don't know how many years, the time starts to blur, but I learned the story of my mom's childhood best friend. So my mom, when she was in grade 6, her best friend, the person she sat with at school, went missing. And my mom, throughout her teenage years, young adult years, middle-age years, wondered what happened to my friend? Are they okay? And so through social media, years later, my mom was able to find the sibling of her friend just to say, hey, did you ever find out what happened to so-and-so? Yeah, do you have any information? And so they had a conversation, and my mom found out that her friend is alive, and they were able to connect and re-meet, and my mom began to learn part of her friend's story. And I met her friend as well, and we're now good friends. And she had been exploited at a very young age. She was born into a home in Ontario where it was an unsafe environment for her, emotionally, physically, in various different ways. And so she left her home thinking that, hey, any other place might be safer than where I'm currently living. And so as she left her home, eventually she met a couple who took her in. They adopted her in a kind of way. But then that couple ended up selling her to traffickers who took her from Ontario at the young age of 14 through the United States and ended up trafficking her in British Columbia in Canada until she was able to exit in her young adult years. And so when I first heard her story, it was the first story I had heard of trafficking and exploitation in Canada, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I had a hard time fathoming that this could happen to a young person in our community. I was really angry at the injustice, and I started asking questions like, does this still happen in Canada? If it does, like, what's being done to like help folks or to help prevent it? And all of these questions kind of led me on a journey to realize, okay, I want to be involved in doing something. And so the first thing that I did is actually the church I was attending at the time had a committee called Untied, and they were doing different fundraising efforts to support international and local charities that helped folks who had been trafficked. So I got involved there, and we were hosting an art gala where we had different visual art pieces and performing art. I remember there being spoken word and dance, and all of these things were to help either depict or to share the stories of real people who had experienced exploitation and to raise funds for organizations that were helping such folks. And it was through this event that we ended up connecting, because we did a little Rogers infomercial, or I guess it wasn't an infomercial, but a commercial of some
little
sort.
calendar event, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, to say, hey, this is going on in the community, please come and listen. And we then had a few different events like that. We had a yard sale fundraiser and other things. And eventually you asked me, hey, like, what would you think about doing a show on this topic? What would be the importance of doing a show on a topic like this? And at that time, I was also in the midst of a career change. I was leaving kind of like the corporate workplace, and I had started working full-time for an NGO focused on trafficking. So anyways, the show became a space where we could really have other folks come and share their knowledge and expertise and share stories in the community to help raise awareness. So that was a very long answer, but
I love that story, and I didn't know that story. So the fact that I started the show with you and still didn't know that story, thank you for sharing it.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible that it impacted your life so much that now this is your life.
Yeah, doing this work, I feel like that individual has impacted me profoundly, and their just courage and resiliency in the ways that they continue to move forward in their healing journey continue to inspire me. And so I'm just grateful to know them and to share life with them and to now be involved in this work.
I think this show is so impactful for so many people because, like you, they wonder, how is this happening in my backyard? And then what does this look like in my neighborhood? And most people don't think human trafficking is happening right in their neighborhood, but this show really kind of educates and informs people that it is. So I remember being pretty overwhelmed when we did our first few episodes with the information that the guests were telling, but it has educated me so much and has given me a different perspective. So thank you for doing that. So we started this show and we started filming it at a location in Aurelia first. We bounced around a few places, Aurelia, Barrie, and then virtually. What were the different reasons that we did that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes, like, just very basically, it was because of what was available. Sometimes it was to change up the physical space and look and location. Sometimes it was, is this space more like conducive to our guests who are maybe traveling from the GTA or things like that, where Aurelia might be just that much further. But then in terms of virtual, well, of course, I think everyone can remember the pandemic that happened not too long ago. And that was really the push for creating virtual episodes, which totally changed the dynamic of the show, of course, and it took some time to get used to, but with everything, there's a silver lining. And the silver lining of doing the episodes virtually is it opened up who could come on the show, right? Because we were limited when we did a physical location of who was able to travel and come spend time to do this interview. Whereas when we moved virtually, we were able to have people join us from the UK, from the United States, from the West Coast, from the East Coast of Canada. Like, we've now had guests with international perspectives and also perspectives from across Canada that would have otherwise gone missed. So I'm really grateful in hindsight that we were able to move in that direction and offer both in person and online, because it made the show more accessible.
I remember the guest list kind of exploded. When we went virtually, you're like, now I can talk to this person, this person. You were so excited, and in turn, so was I. And again, I remember learning so much. Before we go to a break, I want to start asking you about some of your core memories from doing 60 episodes. So I want to talk about any episodes that really stand out to you as a favorite.
As a favorite. That's so difficult.
Guest information,
Yes.
whatever the whole vibe of the show was.
Well, I think just me as a human being, I struggle with like, oh, this is the one area, because it could be a favorite for many different reasons. But one episode I feel like comes to mind as being just like a fun conversation where maybe I was more relaxed, and that was with one of my good friends, Dominique Hawley, who she had biked across Ontario to help raise funds for trafficking. And I just remember that conversation being really inspiring because she's amazing and biked across Ontario, and she's always doing really...
I remember her vividly.
Yeah, she's always doing really ambitious, interesting, and innovative things. And I remember that conversation just being like, just a really easy, relaxed dialogue, and just enjoyed how we were able to communicate in that space and what I was able to learn from her. But so many other folks, for different reasons, like brought value to the show. And so when I think about like what's a favorite, it's there are many that left a big impact on me, that maybe changed the way I thought or viewed the issue of trafficking. There are episodes that made me leave our time together wanting to know more. So many were so humbling, right? Because sometimes when you're involved in this work, like I do full-time research in this area, you might think, oh, you know, I've got knowledge in this area, and then you talk to someone and you're like, I know nothing. and that's a really great position to be constantly learning. So I'm just so grateful for the growth and opportunities I've had to be shaped and to listen to so many amazing and intelligent and inspiring individuals.
And you talk a lot about comfortability, and like that episode specifically, you were comfortable with your friend, and you also have the knowledge of human trafficking. But what was it like becoming a TV host? Because that, when I said, hey, Mikhaela, you should pitch a show, you didn't have experience for that. So what was that like to become a TV host?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it was a journey. I mean, I feel like I was excited about it. I love asking people questions and learning about their experiences and different ways of knowing, but also so intimidated. Like to be in a place where there's cameras on you and you're being recorded and it's going to be shown live. And I think over the years, I've been able to maybe relax a bit more in the role, to hold expectations even for myself a bit loosely. I think at the beginning, I remember just like leaving an episode being like, why did I ask that question that way? Why did I jump in, right? Like a lot of self-doubt. And then working through being like, no, you know what? I'm gonna come, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna do my best, and then I need to leave it. Like I need to leave it because it's not about me. It's not about how I, made a mistake in a word or, didn't ask the right question. It's about ensuring that the person who is sharing feels supported, that they feel like they have a platform to share, and that information gets out to the community so that we can see change and we can see folks who maybe need to reach out for support being provided the hotline number. Like there's so many different ripple effects from the show that are just so beyond like the microcosm of myself.
And after the break, I want to ask you a little bit about the responsibility that you feel as a host of a show that is such an important topic. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Mikhaela on Freedom Fighters Code Grey. Back to Freedom Fighters Code Grey. I'm your special guest host today, and I am here with the real host, Mikhaela. Mikhaela, before the break, we talked a little bit about the show and the responsibility that you felt as a host and getting that information across, and such important information. What did you feel was your main goal or responsibility to host a show with such deep content?
Well, when hosting a show like this, what was kind of top of mind throughout the show, and I feel like in some areas we were able to do this well, and in other areas still room for growth, but wanting to ensure that first and foremost that folks who had lived experience, who wanted to either share the work that they're involved in now, talk about a topic related to trafficking that's of interest to them, or some folks it's important for them to share their story as part of their healing journey. I wanted to make sure that this platform was open and accessible for those folks. I also felt responsibility to ensure that diverse perspectives and aspects of the issue. Once you start realizing all the various facets of human trafficking and how it impacts different people, whether it's a parent, whether it's a coworker or a friend, whether it's someone in the education system, like you just realize there are so many different people in society who have been impacted by this issue. How do we ensure that there's information that helps support them in their various roles, but then also realizing there's like the online component, and then there's the international issues, then it comes down to labor trafficking and what clothes we wear. Like the responsibility was really trying to discern what information needs to get out to the community and whose voice needs to be represented. And that's why I said there could be a billion episodes, because there are so many people, whether it's folks from the Indigenous community talking about how colonization is continuing to impact trafficking in Canada today. And now we're seeing an escalation in online exploitation. And so what do youth need to know about social media and safety? And so it was really discerning, okay, what is kind of a priority, and then trying to find folks who could speak into those issues or topics, but at the same time realizing I'm also just one person and one perspective, so how can I open a space where people could kind of opt in or say, hey, I have an idea for an episode, could I come onto your show? So ensuring that it was accessible as well. So much responsibility all the way around.
That's a lot of responsibility, and I think this is now your opportunity. I want to ask your perspective. Yes, the series is ending, but that doesn't mean that human trafficking isn't important or is over. So I want to ask your perspective about human trafficking today, what it looks like in our community.
So human trafficking happens in many different forms. We see that there is trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation as well as for labor. We saw a massive labor case in Simcoe County a couple years back. And then human trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation, we see really impacting youth in the community. Women and men can be impacted as well. But we would say that, like, through social media and different things like that, we are seeing exploitation in online spaces really increase at a rate that is shocking. And so, we're ending this episode, but yet trafficking continues to shift and change based on the culture, based on newest technologies. And so, I think it's important for folks to know that whatever their conception is, or misconceptions about trafficking, like I know I've talked on the show before about, like, some folks say trafficking is like taken, right? And that's what someone's mind is, but we realize it's so much more complex and nuanced than that. Is to really to continue learning and to ask questions and to not be afraid of engaging in difficult content. I'll just say one more thing on this front. One area for me that's of particular concern that I feel like is not being addressed as fully or taken up as it could be is how AI it may not be trafficking specific or related, but AI is being used as a tool to exploit youth, to create situations of blackmail that could lead into trafficking. And we are seeing so much AI generated child sexual abuse material, for example. And so with AI just kind of like being a relatively new concept, and we don't necessarily have we don't have the laws and policies in place to protect youth and kids online. When we have something like this, just having folks be really discerning and thoughtful and having open and ongoing conversations with the people in their life, to be aware of just the impacts that this type of technology is having on a wide scale in our community.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you first talked about how everyone visualizes the movie Taken, and that's what they visualize, human trafficking. That was definitely my first exposure. So when we started doing the show, and I'm like, what do you mean there's labor trafficking, or it's happening on our streets locally? I didn't understand that, so I'm glad you brought that up. And then this whole AI aspect now is something that has exploded, and now I see it in my current career. how do people get educated on something that is so new that we all really don't know about yet, and the capabilities of what AI can become? Like, where do you find education for this right now?
That is a good question. And I think that kind of brings me back to, even as I think about prevention education, which is something I have been passionate about for a long time, but as I, in my studies even, have been thinking more critically about education, it's like, what information do we need to educate folks? And what, who is constructing that knowledge, if that makes sense, and where is that coming to, and how is it being distributed to folks? Because what I would say in response to that now is, maybe could folks think about writing a letter, for example, to a local politician to say, hey, I'm concerned by how we don't have any online safety policies in play to help protect our kids online. Or it might be getting together with a group of parents to talk about what strategies are you using to talk to young people in these days to create open dialogue around technology, like very grassroots oriented, but also looking at what are some of the structural changes that need to happen to ensure that our society continues to be a place where young people, but all people, can flourish, when we take into account who are the powerful actors in society, for example, who are creating, producing, and distributing this material. What's happening culturally, for example, as it relates to aesthetics and the hypersexuality of children, for example, that's increasing, or even the prevalence of pornography in young people, that's increasing peer-to-peer sexual violence, right? And so these are we're getting to some more philosophical questions about society that we do need to ask and question and figure out, okay, what can I do in my space, in community, to enact change? Rather than just being okay, we need to get this specific set of information out there, because like you said, it's changing and evolving. So what do we need to do to think differently, to act differently, and to create systems in place in society that helps protect folks and create flourishing?
And I think what you said about education, that's the first piece. And I think if people don't know anything about human trafficking, educating those people is the first step. The what's, the who's, the why's, and the how's. And I think that's what your show has been doing. So thank you for educating all of us. I want to ask you about, again, this is a heavy topic, and I know you were drained after many shows, so I want to ask you a little bit about maybe your most emotional show or your toughest show as a host.
So when I think back to the episodes, and ones that maybe took longer time to unpack, were often when folks felt the importance of disclosing maybe a personal experience of trauma or of exploitation. Those were always very difficult. And sometimes I remember sitting in this chair and talking to someone, and I tried to always leave the questions open-ended, and I never wanted someone to feel like they had to share a story of trauma, for example, unless they felt like that was important to share. And so sometimes I wasn't always aware what someone was going to come in and share with me. And so to hear the ways in which folks have experienced such grave injustice and suffering of various kinds was so impactful. I remember sitting here at times, my eyes full of tears, being I don't know how to ask the next question. Or maybe the way I would more empathetically respond to someone if I was out for coffee or on a walk, I felt maybe in this role of host, I couldn't necessarily say all the words I'd want to say or provide all of the interaction I would want. So there almost felt like a barrier at times in that communication flow with folks.
And you're such a compassionate person, so that would be so difficult for you to not burst into tears every time a survivor is telling their story. But like you said, those survivor stories are some of the most impactful and really make your brain start going, oh my gosh, wow. I remember sitting behind the scenes and feeling that way, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when other folks too, it may have been someone who is a service provider, you never know how emotions are gonna hit at certain times, but it may have been a story or a fact about trafficking and exploitation that I hadn't yet been aware of that I found really egregious or something like that, right? And so it was important to take time after the show. I remember the first time we filmed, I don't remember how many we did in a day.
It was a lot. I want to say it was like 3 or 4. It was insane.
At least,
Yeah.
and feeling like dizzy afterwards because there was just so much content and trying to emotionally process and work through it all while maintaining like composure and professionalism and all of the things. So learning and to create that buffer time and space, like even for myself and the producing team, so that we could move forward in a way that was like healthy for all of us, I think was really important.
Well, I want to know what's next for Mikhaela. So you're going to have a little extra time in your life now. So what are you doing right now in your spare time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, right now I'm actually in full-time studies. I'm at York University in their social and political thought program, doing my doctorate, and my research is on human trafficking. And so over the next couple of years, I will hopefully finish that degree. I'm 2 years in. So I'll be able to take some more time to think about interviewing folks and speaking with people in the community, to start writing about how, in particular, sex trafficking is happening in Canada and the various people involved. So I'll be doing a lot of my time will be focused in that area, but as well, like I'm working on a book with some folks, and so it's also focused on this topic. So looking forward to getting that put together and published. I am doing some volunteer work for some nonprofit organizations that help support folks who have been exploited or are maybe on the prevention research side. So I'll continue working in those spaces, and then like loosely affiliated to trafficking, but I do see it as playing an important role in this various work that I'm involved in. I have like a low-key outdoor art school for kids where we dance outside, or we'll have music time or do art and things like that, and raise funds for different organizations that help kids in the community. And that's kind of like, I see it as like a prevention space where kids are able to express themselves in healthy and safe ways. And so those are just a few of the things I'll be involved in.
So you're still super busy. You're not going to have spare time. We've got about 30 seconds left, Mikhaela. I want to thank you so much for allowing me to come out from behind the camera and interview you. This feels like a very full circle moment, but I want to let you close your show for the last time.
Well, Mandy, thank you so much for being here and for being a part of this last episode. It's definitely bittersweet, and thanks to every person who has come on the show over the years to share their insights, their expertise as a frontline service provider, as a researcher, those with lived experience who are doing work in the community or who have come forward to share their story. There are so many countless people who have come onto this program to shed light on human trafficking and who are making a difference every single day to prevent exploitation in the community.